Josh Retrodad, what was I thinking going for an NTSC USA Game Boy set again? Well, this time around, some of those games were even more difficult to find. I'll discuss those games and more after this. And here it is, a USA Game Boy set, minus one game. 504 games. Like I said, minus one game. And I'll tell you what game I'm missing at the end of the video. In 2024, I decided to go for a complete USA North America retail Game Boy set. Not color, just those black and white, those monochrome Game Boy games. I tried once before to get that set. From 2011 to 2022, I collected heavily for the system. I was only 10 away from the set. But looking at my numbers and my record keeping, I was actually more like 20 away. 4 games were actually UK or other regions. They weren't the USA ones. Like Blues Brothers, that was a UK release. That's the one I owned. Game Boy is region free, so you can play all regions on the go with the Game Boy. I wanted a pure set that was released in the good old USA, Canada, Puerto Rico, and Mexico. The USA or North America release set. They're labeled USA. Sometimes the game's artwork is different between the regions. You used to have the NOE version of Tiny Toons 2. It is a different color label. USA is yellow and the other is white. Besides the label difference, the only other change is the region. By the end of 2022, I had over 485 games to my Game Boy collection. That is 485 out of 505 games. I owned 96% of the original library. Out of the 505 games I released between 1989 and 99, 2000, that's when the last black and white Game Boy games were released. There happened to be 16 games I never owned or even played. 2 I thought I owned at one time, but I mistook them for other games. Infogenius released 5 titles in North America: Travel Guide, Spell Checker, and Calculator, Spanish Translator, Personal Organizer, and French Translator. I mixed up Travel Guide and Spell Checker. The Spanish Translator I thought I owned, but I counted the French one twice. These aren't titles you play all the time. They're not Mario, Tetris, or even Mega Man. It's informational data stored on carts that was used before the heavy use of the internet. It's an interesting look back for sure. A true relic of the time period. We have so much access to information now, we just don't need Infogenius to spot us anymore. They aren't common either compared to other Game Boy titles. 3 of the other games happen to be the most expensive Game Boy games: Spud's Adventure, Amazing Tater, and Toxic Crusaders. A game I was surprised I didn't own was Asteroids. I'm not talking about the arcade classics. It has own solo release. I had Centipede solo release, not the variant labeled one, but I had at least Centipede. I owned the single card of Missile Command. To sum it up, I owned all the arcade releases on the Game Boy, except for that one Asteroid solo card. $20 missing games. Not that many overall. For reasons I won't go in completely, I will just say bad timing, a flood, a death in the family. I sold a huge chunk of my original Game Boy collection. It wasn't too much later I regretted that decision. I kept around 150 games. I had a few biggies like Mega Man 5, Castlevania Legends, and Sumo Fighter. For almost a year, my Game Boy count really didn't change that much. I began to buy a few games here and there, then a few more. I felt the rush and love of collecting the original Game Boy again. And by the end of 2024, I decided to go for a complete NTSC set. I knew it would be harder this time though. I bought a lot of games during the time when they were like $1, $2.50. Picked up a handful of Game Boy games, most of them being $2. You could find them easily at thrift stores, garage sales, and game stores. Only a few games were considered super expensive. Other games weren't that much at the time. Collecting for the Game Boy was a cheaper alternative to the NES. Not as many people were going for the Game Boy, at least not the original. Color and GBA, maybe. Still a smaller than the NES crowd, which I was a part of as well. I know it's a lot of background information, but it's important for the plot of today's video. So during my journey, there have been a few Game Boy games that were extremely hard to find. Just to clarify again, I'm only looking for USA labeled carts, and that's what makes some of these games harder to find. Number 10, Cool Spot. I owned it before and I thought it'd be a simple find. I was wrong. I kept finding Spot, the video game. I bought 2 copies of Spot Cool Adventures in lots, but I couldn't just find Cool Spot. I looked at stores, in person, eBay. It just didn't show up. I found many copies of Cool Adventures until one day it finally showed up on eBay and a lot of 4 Game Boy games. I bought it immediately. Even now, not very many copies show up. It's not a rare game, but being on the Game Boy, it's rarer than most 8-bit games anyway. Maybe except Tetris. It was not cool trying to find Cool Spot. Number 9, Days of Thunder. Another not so rare game. You couldn't tell by how many copies are being sold. I used to find this game all the times in stores in 2010s. Even a month before I was actively hunting for Days of Thunder, I saw it at my local game store, thinking it'd be easy to find again, so I passed at the time. I got another Game Boy game instead. That was a mistake. So I went back to the store to buy all the missing Game Boy games I could afford at the time. Days of Thunder being on that list. No dice. It was sold a few days before I went back into the store. I thought, okay, I'll find out another location. I checked a few more stores. And nothing. Few online stores. Nothing. More weeks would go by and I couldn't find a single one. Puzzling for sure, knowing it shouldn't be that difficult to find. Found a USA copy on eBay. I bought it. I was like, finally, crossed off the list. Later that evening, I got a message from the seller and a refund. It wasn't available. It was sold by mistake. Had to start looking again. It would take over 2 months before I finally purchased it. Even now, there's only like a handful of copies online. Cool World. A strange choice for a movie tie-in game. This is a rare card among the Game Boy. The NES port isn't very common either. It's rare on the handheld system though, where maybe 1 or 2 is being sold. It's an expensive Game Boy game to boot, going for like 80 or more at the time of doing this video. I tried my familiar local haunts. Again, nothing. Even eBay, nothing. I tried an online store where I got a lot of Game Boy games before. They had it, so I had to get it. This game makes sense why it'd be harder to find. Even my last set, I had a copy, but it took me a long time to find it. This one doesn't surprise me why it's on the list, but it's only number 8. I'm flabbergasted by this next one. Number 7, Madden 97. There are 3 Maddens on the Game Boy. Madden 95, Madden 96, and Madden 97. You could find 95 easily. I did, both sets. Madden 96, easily. Madden 97, difficult? At least this time. When I previously owned the game, I found it before 95 or 96. It's not a rare game at all. Maybe more uncommon than the previous Maddens on the Game Boy. I just had a hard time finding the title, even on eBay. Even in other websites, it was sold out. Need 95 or 96? They had it, just not 97. I finally tracked down a copy, but it is still surprising how problematic it was. Number 6, Loops. It's an uncommon title for the Nintendo Entertainment System. Love that rarity on the Game Boy. Just like the game, it is puzzling how difficult it was to track down a copy. I could find the NOE versions or the Japanese versions, but that USA label was good at playing hide and seek. Looking over and over for it, kept going in loops. It was irony. I finally found a copy, but it wasn't local. It was across the pond, as they say. I had to buy a USA version in Europe. It arrived and I have loops on the Game Boy. Sometimes it's all about timing. Since then, I bumped into a few USA loops on eBay. It's funny how life works out sometimes. This next one's both on the NES and Game Boy. Number 5, Jimmy Connor's Tennis. It's the rarest tennis game on the NES and Game Boy. Legit rare game for the USA label. The NOE version seems to be more dominant. It's a lower triple-digit valued game. It was a hard game to find in my old collection as well. With that in mind, I knew what to expect the second time around. Remarkably, I found it easier than the previous copy I owned. I got Jimmy Connor's Tennis, the USA version. I bought it slightly under market as well. It's a label upgrade compared to my original copy, so I'm happy about that. It's just tennis with Jimmy Connors. It's Jimmy Connor's Tennis. It says so in the name. Let's pause for a minute and do a flashback refresher course. What is DMG? DMG stands for Dot Matrix Game. These are the original Game Boy games, and they are labeled as such. On a Game Boy card or game pack, you'll have its region listed. Here's an example, DMG SS USA. Solar Striker. This is the NTSC release. This is a European game, DMG SC UKV, Solomon's Club. Now back to the video. Number 4. Toxic Crusaders. I mentioned in the beginning of this video there were only 16 games I never owned for the Game Boy. Until recently it was down to only 3. They happen to be the most expensive original Game Boy games as well. I wanted to get at least one off the list before the summer's end. I wanted Toxic Crusaders. I've seen it for sale years ago at one of my local game spots. That was years ago. I tried though to find a copy at a store. Understandably, it wasn't successful. eBay had a few copies but not that many. I didn't want to spend the money on a CIB or a cart with a manual. One copy was $300. The only thing about that $300 copy, it was a little yellow, oxidized from over the years. That's one thing that kept me from buying it. Plus $300. I knew it was rare. Every once in a while, I would look at the game, put it in my cart, almost click order. That song and dance happened several times. That is until I got a coupon and it knocked off some cash. Now it was below $300, so I bought it. This is a big deal for me. It's been on my list for over a decade now. One of those games I wanted for a long time, not just for the set, but for the collection. 3. With Toxic Crusaders being out of the way, there's only 2 games I've never owned. Just 2. Spud's Adventure and Amazing Tater. Atlas and games featuring potatoes. Both are expensive. The catch is, there seems to be more Spud's Adventures on eBay, where Amazing Tater seems to be like loops and only found overseas right now. The bootlegs in Japan versions are plentiful on eBay. After some time, I found a great looking Spud's Adventure, and it came with the manual. That manual can go upwards to $400 on its own. Fantastic deal. So I had to get it. Spud's Adventure is a lot of fun. I'm enjoying it. The most expensive original Game Boy game off the list. 2. Night Quest. This RPG was so hard to find. I looked everywhere to get this game again. Again, we're talking about USA labeled games. I found the cheaper alternative Japanese versions. I had some hope when I found a post on Instagram saying they had a copy in their game store for $204. I called and asked if they shipped. No, of course not. One of the most sought after games for the collection. Get in my reach and it's taken away. I kept using Google Lens to help search. After page of zero, zilch, blankness, I find a CIB copy. It was on a website I wasn't familiar with. I wanted to lose for several reasons besides cost, but it could be an option if I needed to be. It was $300 under what a CIB copy usually goes for. Kept searching on my phone for days. Nothing else. I was having my own retro Night Quest trying to find Night Quest. This game and the game in the #1 spot were both kind of be done at the same time. I couldn't find a loose copy, so I decided to buy the CIB Night Quest. I couldn't remember the website. I could always look up the search history and find it. So I thought. All the search history was gone, except for the previous day. I used Google Lens, did the same technique. Back to square one. Rinse and repeat, rinse, repeat. The definition of crazy. Doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. I took a break from looking. One night I tried again. If I couldn't find it, I was going to wait for Portland Retro Gaming Expo 2025. A video game company in New Jersey showed up, and it had a copy. The picture they were using wasn't the actual game, it was like a whole picture. I asked myself, did they actually have the game? Was it the USA label? Or another region? Do they ship? I was desperate to get the game off the list. I called the store and asked if they shipped. They did. Then I asked if the copy was USA. He sent me pictures right away. Quest is over to get Night Quest. Before we go into the #1 most difficult game for my set, here are some honorable mentions. Stop That Roach. It's just a very uncommon game to find. I found it way before a lot of these games on the list. I went to one video game store looking for Game Boy games, and they asked me, hey, have you ever heard of this game? I told them I did, not a common game. They never heard of the game before, till it was traded into the store. For example, how uncommon it is. Honorable mention 2, Lamborghini American Challenge. Another port. It was also on the Amiga, Commodore 64, and Super Nintendo. For the Game Boy, it's easier to find the French version, FRG. It was published by Thais France after all. The USA version with a decent label is a little trickier. #1, Cool Ball. The story is similar to Knight's Quest in regards to searching for and looking for, except it has a big twist. I got scammed. In order to find Cool Ball, which by far was the most difficult game to find on this list, that's why it's the #1 spot, high and low I searched. No one had it. Some of the best tips come from other accumulators of vintage games. So I decided to reach out to fellow Game Boy collectors and asked if anyone had the game. I got a couple thumbs up, but no hits. Around the same time I was posting these questions like, hey, anyone have this game for sale? Anyone seen this game in their area? I reached out to my buddy Retro Reminisce. Great guy, fellow collector, he's helped me out in the past. He seems to be able to find stuff in his region versus mine. An hour or so after I texted Retro Reminisce, a person messaged me and asked if this is the game I was looking for. There it was, Cool Ball USA. I asked, how much? The seller's from North Carolina. I'm on the opposite side of the country, so he tells me 100 was shipped. It's a little higher than it should have been. It's really like a $60 to $80 game, but desperate times. I ask him, what's your PayPal goods and services? He responds and says, I don't do PayPal goods and services. I said, I only do PayPal goods and services for buyer protection, unless I personally know the person. So I'm thinking the deal's dead in the water. The seller hits me back with a proposal. I pay half now, and once it arrives, I pay the other half. I'm still a little leery. I look at the group's rules. No scammers allowed and other things about venting out bad sellers of the group. The guy's been in the group a month or so longer than myself. I just joined. He even posted and commented on other posts. He hasn't been kicked out and he posted something for sale with no issues. I take the gamble and pay 50%. I message Retro and say, hey, I found the game, thanks for looking. A few days later, the seller's about to ship, and before he heads out the door, he asks if there's anything else I need before he heads out. He might have it. I asked about Toxic Crusaders, thinking most likely he doesn't have it, because it's a rare game. 5 minutes later, he shows a picture of the game. The price was pretty fair, but I wasn't getting paid for another 5 days. We deliberated some, and I would pay another $40 in good faith, and pay the rest when the items arrive. He ships them, gives me the tracking number. It's not UPS, FedEx, USPS. It's another shipper I've never heard of, but I plugged in the tracking number and it says it's possession of the carrier. I'm like, awesome. I just took 2 biggies off the list. About 2 days later, the guy asked if I checked on shipping. I haven't. Been busy, so I did. There was a hold on the packages. So I responded to the seller of that information. He says, what? I'll check with my guy that works there. A few minutes later, he tells me everything's all good, but we need to place insurance that will be reimbursed once the package has been delivered. That's when I knew it. It was an insurance scam. I've been duped. I tell him, I'm not paying for anything else, and I'll take the $90 as a gambling loss. Lesson learned. PayPal goods and services this point forward for sure. Good faith, my booty. So time passes by, I buy Toxic Crusaders and Night Quest. Know what they say? 4th time's a charm. Posted on eBay, it's there. Cool Ball USA. But there are 2 catches. The price was even more than the scammer's non-existing Cool Ball. It's across the ocean again, this time in Athens. Even with the snags, I bought it quickly. Cool Ball is still a hard game to find. I did see another one for sale recently on eBay, but only one that's for sale in the US. So that's my 10 hardest games to find for my Game Boy set. And what's up with cool being in the title of some of the games? 3 out of 10 games. Sometimes it's all about timing. You just have to have the right timing and a little bit of luck. Now I'm down to only 1 game for the set. Amazing Tater. And I'll be hunting for that game at Portland Retro Gaming Expo 2025. Have fun, go game, see you at PRGE 2025. Thank you again so much for watching this video. Is there any games on here that surprised you? Are you a fellow Game Boy collector? Any games that were really hard to get for your collection? And if you wouldn't mind, if you like this type of content, I'm having a lot more coming out. Please like, subscribe if you can, comment, it really does help me out, and see you on my next video.